Hi everyone. Woke up this morning to the news that Richard Chamberlain had passed away at the age of 90. Sad news that, so I just wanted to say a few words about that. Now, Stuart George's Home Movies, he's a friend of the channel. He has often talked about Richard Chamberlain being his favourite actor of all time. And I get that. I understand why he's saying that. Stuart and I are of a pretty similar age, and I don't think we can emphasise quite strongly enough that when we were young, only 3 TV channels, Richard Chamberlain just seemed to be on TV all the time at our very formative years. So when we were still sort of 10 and going into our teens, early teens. So yeah, there was a huge amount of Richard Chamberlain on TV. So a lot of films, but as well as the actual famous miniseries that he was in as well. So yeah, I'll just touch through some of those. Now, significantly, he was Aramis in The Three Musketeers and The Four Musketeers, really rousing swashbucklers, directed by Richard Lester, with Oliver Reed, Michael York and Frank Finlay as the other Musketeers. Really good fun films these were, and these were on TV a lot. Another couple of films which I don't have in my collection, but certainly were on TV, it seemed to be in rotation, we saw them a lot, and that were the remakes of The Count of Monte Cristo, Alexandre Dumas' tale, as well as The Man in the Iron Mask. So again, both of these films on TV repeatedly, so we definitely saw those a lot. And in 1974 he starred in one of the biggest disaster movies of the 1970s, The Towering Inferno. This one had Steve McQueen and Paul Newman headlining the cast, but a huge cast that was involved here, and Richard Chamberlain certainly was very significant in this because he played a subcontractor who took some chances with the safety of the building that he was employed to construct, and it is his decisions that led to the huge fire, which is the subject of The Towering Inferno. But yeah, a hugely enjoyable disaster movie, this one. And then another one that was on TV a lot when we were young was this version of Cinderella, which was The Slipper and the Rose, in which Richard Chamberlain stars alongside Gemma Craven. And this one directed by Brian Forbes. And Richard Chamberlain had worked with Brian Forbes previously in just a minor role in the film The Madwoman of CHAILLOT, which starred Katharine Hepburn. A very interesting departure in the 70s was to go to Australia to star in Peter Weir's The Last Wave, a really fascinating film this, in which he plays a lawyer who gets involved with a murder and exploring Aboriginal customs and cultures. A really atmospheric film, this one, quite unusual, from Peter Weir, who directed Picnic at Hanging Rock as well, so you can imagine just how strange and ethereal this one gets at times. But absolutely, for Richard Chamberlain, it was also his work on TV that was really significant. Now, Dr. Kildare was a hugely important series for him, but that one I would say was before my time. I'd never actually watched Dr. Kildare, so if you're older than me, I'm sure Dr. Kildare really springs to mind for you. But certainly Richard Chamberlain was involved in a number of really impactful TV series. These were huge events on TV. So the first one that I remember was this one from the James A. Michener novel, and this was Centennial, also known as a Colorado Saga. And Richard Chamberlain in this one has a really significant role, playing a fur trapper who ventures from Canada down into America and starts trading. But yeah, huge sprawling series, this one, that covers the history of America, Centennial. There is some dodgy facial beards and makeup in this one, which is a bit distracting, but yeah, this is still worthwhile watching, Centennial. And then in 1980, perhaps his most significant TV role, and that was as John Blackthorne in the adaptation of James Clavell's Shogun, which co-starred the great Toshiro Mifune as well. Absolutely epic series. This was a landmark TV event. Certainly watched it when I was young. Rewatched it again recently, and it still holds up pretty well. Now, obviously, this has been remade with Cosmo Jarvis starring in the John Blackthorne role. And The emphasis of the new version is much more on the Japanese culture, and so I do actually prefer the new version over Shogun, but you have to remember at the time this was just a huge TV event, and really was quite a major one. So yeah, Shogun. And then his other TV miniseries role that he'll be most remembered for as well is for starring in the adaptation of Colleen McCulloch's The Thorn as a priest who finds love. This one co-starring Rachel Ward. And this was done in 1983, but he did return to the role in the 90s to do The Thorn The Missing Years, this one co-starring Amanda Donohoe, who had starred alongside Oliver Reed in Castaway. Now, also in the 80s, I don't have these films, I'm not a big fan of them to be honest, but I'm sure there are big fans out there. But yeah, he took on the role of Alan Quatermain in King Solomon's Mines and Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold, both of which co-starred Sharon Stone. These were canon films, very much designed to cash in on the success of the Raiders of the Lost Ark movies. Much less budget, much ropier special effects. They have their fun elements to them. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them, but I know they are hugely popular. And then also in 1988, here he is as Jason Bourne, yes. So there was a TV adaptation, a 3-hour adaptation of Robert Ludlum's The Bourne Identity. And this was much more faithful to the book, it seems, than the Matt Damon versions, but it is quite long and sprawling. Don't expect the fierce action that there is in the Matt Damon movies. But yeah, this is still a well-structured story nonetheless, pretty well told, but it is a bit plodding. So ultimately, I think, perhaps like Stuart George, Richard Chamberlain just really springs to mind in terms of my childhood, because he just was so heavily present on TV when I was at a very young age. And so particularly repeat viewings of The Count of Monte Cristo, The Man in the Iron Mask, The Three Musketeers, The Four Musketeers, and The Slipper and the Rose. Those were the movies that just seemed to be on rotation a lot. And then also these big event TV series, Centennial and Shogun in particular. Okay, now I know I've missed out some films here which probably some people are fans of. I'm sorry, I'm not a fan of The Swarm. I haven't seen Ken Russell's The Music Lovers, in which he starred. But yeah, those are the films I have in my collection. Let me know your thoughts on Richard Chamberlain, an actor. Sad to hear of his passing. I do think he's very much of a time, and his role in the late 70s and early 80s was hugely significant. But yeah, sad to hear of his passing. Let me know your thoughts. Okay, all the best to you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.